My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 29 years old, and for 6 months last year, I lived in my parents' guest room, the one with the stiff twin bed, the peeling wallpaper, and a closet that still smelled like Christmas decorations. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I didn't even unpack most of my boxes. I told myself I'd only be there until things settled. My mother, Susan, had other ideas. When I moved back in, I had just been laid off from a small nonprofit tech firm. Budget cuts, they said. I had spent 3 years helping community centers digitize their services, things like scheduling remote access for seniors, even helping veterans navigate online benefits. I was proud of that work, but once funding dried up, so did the job. I applied to everything I could find: remote jobs, contract gigs, even positions way below my qualifications. I took on freelance projects here and there, mostly web design and digital troubleshooting for local businesses, but the market was tight. My savings disappeared faster than I expected. Rent in upstate New York wasn't exactly forgiving, and in the end, I packed what I could fit in my hatchback and drove back to the same cul-de-sac I grew up on. Dad Harold greeted me like he would an unexpected house guest, polite, quiet, a pat on the back. Mom offered a tight smile and a list of things that needed fixing. The thermostat was acting up again, the printer jammed every third page, and the Wi-Fi kept dropping around 8 p.m. I didn't complain. I set up new email filters for them, installed antivirus software, restructured their budgeting app, and updated their online banking security. I even flagged a fraudulent charge on Dad's debit card before he noticed. They never asked. They just assumed. Susan wasn't unkind, not in the obvious ways. She didn't yell or slam doors, but every morning she'd clean the already clean kitchen like she was erasing me from it. She'd fold laundry with sharp, precise movements, and when she passed by my room, she'd linger just long enough to let the silence do the talking. Eric, my younger brother, came by maybe twice a month. He's 25 lives in Manhattan and works in finance, or at least that's how he introduces himself. Mom lights up the second he walks through the door. "There's my star," she beams. "You look like you've lost weight." Meanwhile, I'm in the corner reconnecting the Wi-Fi router for the 3rd time that week. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it building like steam under a lid. I wasn't home. I was a shadow passing through a reminder of something they didn't want to look at too closely. What I didn't know then was that the person they barely saw, the one folding laundry behind the scenes, fixing their passwords, quietly making dinner, was the same person their entire system was silently depending on. They wouldn't realize that until I left. It was a Sunday. The kind my mother used to call family days, back when we still used placemats and had matching silverware. She made baked ziti, Eric's favorite, not mine. He showed up in a pressed shirt and expensive-looking watch, greeted Mom with a kiss on the cheek, and tossed his keys in the bowl like he hadn't ignored her calls all month. Eric Whitman, 25. Younger by 4 years, but treated like he'd aged in reverse. He worked in Midtown for some private investment firm and always had some new app or crypto term to throw into conversation. Susan hung on every word. I set the table, careful not to chip the one dish with a crack down the middle. When I sat down, Eric looked at me like I'd just shown up uninvited. Dinner began the usual way, Mom asking Eric about work, Eric pretending to be modest. I tried not to say much, just focused on the food and kept my eyes on my plate. Then it came. Susan turned to me, voice overly casual. "Have you been applying to any real jobs lately?" I froze. I had told her just the day before that I had 2 interviews lined up this week. I even let her read one of my cover letters. But none of that mattered. Not when Eric was here. Before I could respond, Eric cut in without looking at me. At some point, it stops being bad luck and starts being bad choices. I swallowed my words and my pride. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick electric, but only for me. They kept talking. They laughed. At something I don't remember what. I carried my plate to the kitchen, stood at the counter, and ate the rest of my dinner with my back to the room. I could hear Snippet's needs to grow up. Can't cuddle her forever. Embarrassing. They didn't whisper. They didn't have to. What hit hardest wasn't the words. It was how easy they were to say. How natural, like they'd been rehearsed. That night, I lay in bed, eyes wide open, the same cracked dish sitting in the sink where no one else would touch it. And I started wondering, what exactly had I become in this house? The next morning was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the type that hangs in the air like smoke after something's already burned. I was in the sunroom hunched over my laptop, finishing the final tweaks on a website redesign for a local bakery. Their new spring menu was launching, and I had just uploaded the image carousel when I heard the sound heels on hardwood, quick, certain steps. Susan appeared in the doorway. My mother had a way of folding her arms that made them look like barricades. She didn't knock. She never did. "I need to talk to you," she said. I paused, looked up. "Okay, you need to start paying rent." I'd heard this before, usually tossed out between comments about the electric bill and the way I load the dishwasher. So I said what I always said: I will. "I told you once this job wraps, I'll send something." "They're paying you," she asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes." She tilted her head. "I'm not talking about someday. I'm talking now. Today." I blinked. "You want me to write you a check with money I haven't even received yet?" She didn't flinch. "No, I want you to grow up." And then it came. Clean, sharp, casual. "You're just a Leech Claire, living off us. And it's gone on long enough." That word leech landed like a slap I wasn't ready for. She said it without blinking, like it was a diagnosis. Like I'd always been that. Before I could speak, she turned, disappeared down the hallway, and came back dragging a duffel bag I hadn't seen since college. She dropped it at my feet. "Go leech somewhere else." I stared at the bag. Blue canvas. Still had my name stitched on the side. I zipped it up, slid my laptop and charger in, grabbed my toothbrush. No scene. No yelling. When I stepped outside, the sky looked too blue for the moment, the driveway too clean. I left without goodbye. No one followed. No one watched. But as I walked to my car, I realized something. I hadn't just been cut out of the household. I'd been erased from it. And not one of them seemed worried about what would happen when I was gone. They should have been. I didn't have a plan. Just a duffel bag, a laptop, and a tightness in my chest I couldn't name yet. The first night I stayed with Lucas, an old college friend who still called me Whitman like we were in a group project. He gave me the pull-out couch and a pair of clean socks. No questions. No pity. Just enough space to breathe. After a few days, I moved into the spare room at Ava's, my ex-girlfriend, the kind of person who still made tea before asking how I was. We hadn't spoken in months, but when I texted her, reply was one word: come. That week felt like drifting between lives that used to be mine. Ava worked evenings at a community health clinic, so the apartment was quiet. I filled the silence with freelance jobs, small sites, repair gigs, whatever came through. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I fixed things, not just websites. I was fixing myself. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message on LinkedIn. A recruiter from a nonprofit startup had found my portfolio through a project I'd done for a local art professor months earlier. They were hiring for a digital systems role, remote, full-time, benefits. I interviewed in Ava's kitchen wearing a blazer over sweatpants. 2 days later, I got the offer. It wasn't a six-figure Silicon Valley gig, but it was enough. Enough to sign a lease on a studio apartment with creaky floors, a fridge that hummed too loudly, and sunlight that hit just right in the morning. That first night alone, I sat on the floor with takeout lo mein and a half-charged phone. No lectures, no silence, no one waiting to tell me who I wasn't. For the first time in years, everything around me was mine. The floor, the ceiling, the air. And nobody could throw me out of it. 3 weeks after I moved into my new place, I was sitting at my desk, barely more than a table with legs, finishing a grant reporting dashboard for the nonprofit. The radiator was hissing the overhead light, flickering slightly, but I didn't mind. Everything in that room, broken or not, was mine. That's when my phone buzzed. Missed call. Harold Whitman. My father. I hadn't heard from him since the night I left. Not a text, not a, "How are you?" I watched the screen go dark, then light up again. Second call. Same name. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through Claire. "Why is the bank account frozen?" I stared at it. For a second, I didn't understand. And then I remembered. Back when I was still living at home before I became a leech, Dad had asked me to help modernize their finances. He hated phone menus and paper statements. He gave me access to their joint account so I could set up mobile banking, automate their bills, link their tax filing software, and set recovery protocols. I became the secondary administrator on every system, not to spend anything, just to troubleshoot. That access hadn't been revoked. If anything triggered a lockout, too many failed logins, suspicious activity, they'd need the secondary contact to verify identity. That meant me. I didn't respond right away. I imagined the scene clearly. Susan pacing the kitchen, arms crossed, voice sharp. Harold poking uselessly at the tablet, cursing under his breath, holding the phone too close to his face while talking to customer service. I typed out a reply. Ask the Leech. No emoji, no explanation, just that. It only took an hour. My phone lit up like a slot machine. 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 1 message from Susan. This isn't funny, Claire. Call your father back. We can't pay the credit card. Are you really doing this after everything we've done for you? I didn't answer. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't playing games. But for the first time in a long, long time, I had leverage. And I wasn't going to waste it. They showed up on a Thursday. I heard the knock before I saw them. My building has this echo, slow, deliberate footsteps that bounce off the hallway walls when someone waits too long at your door. I looked through the peephole and didn't move right away. Susan stood there, my mother holding her purse tight to her chest, like it might shield her from whatever was coming. Harold beside her wore a jacket too light for the weather and a tie that looked like it had been knotted in a hurry. I opened the door. If you're here to yell, don't. They didn't. They walked in without a word, glancing around at the studio like they couldn't quite believe this was where I lived now. It was small, yes, but clean. Light streamed through the window and hit the stack of paperwork I'd left open on my desk. No one spoke for a full minute. Then Susan cleared her throat. Her voice was softer than I remembered. We need your help. 3 weeks ago, she'd called me a leech and thrown my bag at my feet. Now she stood in the center of my life, careful not to touch anything. Harold tried to explain, said something about the bank, about the taxes, about how Eric had tried to help, but made it worse. I already knew. I'd seen the alerts. We missed the mortgage payment, Susan added quietly. There are late fees. I looked at her. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. That sounds awful, I said. You must feel really stuck. She nodded, then almost in a whisper. I'm sorry. There was no lecture, no justification, just those 2 words. Harold echoed her slower. We didn't realize how much you were doing. I believed them partially. I think they didn't want to know. There's a difference. They asked if I would come back, reset the systems, fix everything. They said they'd pay me for my time, that things would be different. I shook my head. I'll help, I said. But I'm not coming back, and I meant it. We spent 2 hours at my desk, Harold on one side squinting at the screen, Susan on the other, arms crossed but silent. I walked them through everything, resetting login credentials, verifying identity through secondary recovery codes, relinking the tax software. I had to call tech support twice, once to confirm a 2-factor code they'd ignored, once to unlock the HSA portal that Eric had accidentally flagged for suspicious activity. Susan didn't say much. Harold muttered under his breath every time a new security question popped up. This is ridiculous, he kept saying. But he answered them anyway. When it was done, I leaned back and looked at them. I'll send over a document outlining every step. And after that, I'm out. Susan frowned. Out. No more admin access, I said. No more late-night calls. No more Claire, the internet's down. You'll have to figure it out or ask someone else. Maybe Eric. Harold didn't argue. He just nodded. Slowly. They stood, gathered their things. Neither reached for a hug. I didn't offer one. After the door closed behind them, I sat at my desk and opened my Google Drive. There it was, one last shared folder. Banking for Mom and Dad, do not delete. I hovered over it for a moment, then clicked, delete, confirm, gone. No pop-up asked me if I was sure, and I didn't need it to. For a few days, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe they'd respected the boundary. Maybe they'd let it go. But families don't really let things go. They just find new ways to spin the story. It started with a Facebook message from Aunt Cheryl. "Hey, sweetie, heard you moved out on your own? That's so great. Your mom said you've been distant lately. Just wanted to check in. Everything okay?" Then came a screenshot from Trevor, my cousin on Dad's side. He was in a group chat with some of the extended family. In it, Susan had written, "Claire's changed. Ever since she got that new job, she's been cold, distant. I don't even recognize her anymore. All I did was ask for help, and she acted like I betrayed her." Then Eric, my brother, emailed. He hadn't said a word to me since the account meltdown. Now suddenly I got 5 paragraphs. "Look, I know there's been tension, but Mom and Dad aren't perfect. Maybe instead of blaming them, you could try being more understanding. You had a rough patch. We all do. Doesn't mean the world's out to get you. Let's talk soon." Maybe coffee, I didn't reply. Because none of them understood. This wasn't about one fight or one word. It was about all the times I was invisible until they needed me. A month later, I left New York. My company offered a relocation bonus to join their West Coast expansion, and I took it without hesitation. Portland felt like breathing. The apartment was small, but the light was soft, and no one in the building knew my last name. I joined a local tech meetup, made friends. Once a week, I volunteered at a senior center teaching people how to navigate email, digital banking, two-factor authentication. One afternoon, I sat beside a woman named Marlene, walking her through how to reset her Medicare password. She laughed a little embarrassed and said, "You're so patient." I smiled. Patience is all I've ever had. That night, I sent one last email. Subject update. "Hi, Mom and Dad. Just wanted to let you know I'll be relocating to Portland for work. I've removed myself from all financial systems and accounts. I won't be available for tech help going forward. I hope this new chapter gives us all some peace. Claire." No reply, not even a period. But this time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and wrote the first sentence of something new. Something mine. I don't need an apology. I just wonder if I disappeared, would anyone notice I was the one keeping things running? What about you? Have you ever walked away? And no one asked why. If you've ever been called a burden, just leave a single dot.